Hey guys, tonight we are going to see if you have the luck, the constitution, and the sheer stubbornness required to survive the most famous biological disaster in human history, the Black Death. Imagine a world where the only notification you get about a global pandemic isn't a push alert on your phone, but a terrified merchant whispering in a tavern about how everyone in the next town over just dissolved. The stakes are high, the hygiene is practically non existent, and honestly, you probably won't survive this. Statistically, you're about to become a very grim statistic in a parish record book. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing the global roll call. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing ankle deep in mud that has the consistency of cold oatmeal and the smell of a barnyard that hasn't been cleaned since the last crusade. This is your life now. It is late 1347, and you are currently navigating the main market square of a bustling European port city. Let's say Messina, or maybe somewhere in Dorset. It doesn't really matter where you are, because the geography is about to become irrelevant. What matters is the noise. It's a wall of sound, wains creaking with rusted axles, chickens squawking their last protests before becoming dinner, and the incessant shouting of hawkers trying to sell you woolen tunics that itch just looking at them. You trudge through the crowd, pulling your cloak tighter. The fabric is rough, heavy wool that smells faintly of lanolin and wood smoke. In this era, everyone smells like wood smoke. It's the eau de cologne of the 14th century, masking the more potent, biological odors of a society that views bathing with deep suspicion. You're just here to buy some salted herring and perhaps a loaf of bread that acts more like a doorstop than food, but the atmosphere today feels different. There's a static charge in the air, a kind of nervous energy that buzzes beneath the usual chaotic hum of commerce. You stop at a spice merchant's stall. This guy is the medieval equivalent of a tech influencer. He's got the exotic goods, the connections to the East, and an attitude that suggests he knows things you don't. Usually, he's trying to upsell you on nutmeg or peppercorns, pricing them like they're made of solid gold. But today he's not shouting. He's leaning over his counter, speaking in low, hurried tones to a cluster of locals who look pale. You drift closer, pretending to inspect a barrel of dried peas, eavesdropping with the shameless curiosity that kept our ancestors alive. He's talking about the East. In the medieval mind, the East is a vague, almost mythical concept, a place of infinite riches and monsters, somewhere past the edge of the map, where dragons might actually be a zoning issue. But the stories coming down the Silk Road aren't about silk or spices today. They are about death. Not the usual death, wars, famine, or the occasional bad oyster, but something total. The merchant claims that in Greater Tartary, India, and other regions you've only heard of in songs, the populations have simply ceased to exist. He whispers about a pestilence that moves faster than a horseman. He says it starts with a fever and ends days later, with bodies piled so high they can't be buried. You roll your eyes a little. This sounds like classic market gossip, the medieval version of a conspiracy theory thread on a forum at 3 a.m. Rumors like this are common. Just last month, someone swore they saw a two-headed calf that predicted the price of grain. you dismiss it as exaggeration. People love a good apocalypse story. It makes their boring turnip farming lives feel more dramatic. However, historians still argue whether these early rumors were actually exaggerated or if the devastation in Central Asia really was that absolute before it ever touched Europe. Some records suggest that entire cities on the steppes were wiped out years before the first Italian ship brought the infection home, creating a vacuum of silence that was more terrifying than the screams. But standing here, holding your bag of dried peas, you don't know about the epidemiology of Yersinia pestis. You just know that this merchant looks genuinely rattled. He talks about the port of Kaffa. This is a mainstream historical fact you've heard whispered about. The Golden Horde, a massive Mongol army, had besieged the Genoese city of Kaffa in the Crimea. But then the army started dying. In a final act of biological spite, arguably the first instance of biowarfare, the Mongol Khan ordered the corpses of his plague-ridden soldiers loaded onto catapults. You try to visualize this, it sounds like something from a grim fairy tale. They hurled the dead bodies over the city walls, raining sickness down on the Italians trapped inside. It's a horrific image, grotesque and absurd, like a Monty Python sketch directed by Quentin Tarantino. The merchant says the Genoese fled Kaffa in their galleys, sailing away from the rot, but he pauses looking toward the harbor of your own city. He says those ships are coming here. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the autumn breeze. The crowd around the stall shifts uneasily. A woman crosses herself, muttering a prayer. You look at the sky. It's a flat slate gray. There were rumors of strange astrological signs earlier in the year, a grand conjunction of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn in the sign of Aquarius. The scholars at the University of Paris, basically the Ivy League of the Middle Ages, but with less rowing and more theology, issued a report claiming this planetary alignment corrupted the atmosphere. They say it created a miasma, a poisonous vapor rising from the earth. You take a deep breath. The air smells like roasted onions, wet dog, and the open sewer running down the center of the street. If bad air kills you, shouldn't you have been dead years ago? The logic doesn't quite track, but you respect the experts. If the guys in the funny hats say it's Jupiter's fault, who are you, a lowly peasant, to argue with the solar system? You pay for your peas, counting out the coins. The silver is worn thin, clipped around the edges. Inflation is annoying, but at least the economy is functioning. That's the thing about the world right now. It feels permanent. The church bells are ringing the vespers, marking the time just as they have for centuries. The feudal system is locked in place. Nobles at the top, you at the bottom, and a whole lot of mud in between. It feels like this structure is carved in stone. The idea that a microscopic organism could come along and shatter this entire social order in less than 5 years is laughable. It's like telling someone in 1920 that horses are about to go out of style. You start walking home. The streets are narrowing as the sun dips below the timber-framed houses. The upper stories of the buildings jut out over the street, nearly touching each other, creating a tunnel of gloom. It's cozy, in a claustrophobic, fire hazard sort of way. You pass a beggar with a twisted leg, a group of apprentices playing dice in a doorway, and a priest hurrying to evening mass. Everything is normal. Everything is fine, but that whisper from the merchant sticks in your brain. Ships of death. You wonder what it would look like. Would the sails be black? Would the crew be skeletons? Your imagination, fueled by superstition and a lack of scientific literacy, runs wild. You decide that tonight you'll burn a little extra rosemary in the hearth, just in case. Not because you believe the rumors, of course. You're a rational medieval citizen. You know that if God wants to punish the world, he'll probably send a flood or a famine, something classic. A pestilence that turns your lymph nodes into black, oozing golf balls. That seems a bit excessive, even for the Old Testament. You reach your door, heavy oak, reinforced with iron straps. You step inside, leaving the chaotic noise of the market behind. You scrape the muck off your boots, inhaling the scent of your own home, stale rushes on the floor, wood smoke, and the simmering pot of pottage that has been cooking since Tuesday. It's less like a recipe and more like an ongoing edible experiment. You sit down, oblivious to the fact that you are enjoying the final moments of an era. The Middle Ages, as you know them, are over. They just haven't filed the paperwork yet. The rumors are traveling down the coast, carried on the wind, carried on the flea-infested backs of rats that are currently scurrying up a mooring rope just a few miles away. But for now, you eat your pottage. It needs salt. It has been a few weeks since that conversation with the spice merchant, and the dread has settled into a dull, background hum, much like the tinnitus you get from standing too close to the blacksmith's anvil. You are now standing on the quayside. The harbor is the lungs of the city, breathing in goods and exhaling money, but today the breath feels ragged. The sky is the color of a bruised plum, low and heavy, threatening a rain that never quite falls. You're down here ostensibly to buy fresh fish before the fishmongers let it sit in the sun long enough to gain sentience. But really, you're watching the horizon. You are waiting for the Genoese. In the 14th century, the Genoese are the logistics titans of the world, the long-haul truckers of the Mediterranean. If it exists, they will ship it, tax it, and probably fight a small naval war over the rights to insure it. You spot the silhouettes of 12 galleys rounding the headland. They are low in the water, their banks of oars rising and falling with an uneven, sluggish rhythm. A healthy galley cuts through the water like a predator. These ships look like they are stumbling. As they drift closer, the usual harbor sounds, the shouting of dock workers, the creaking of cranes seem to dampen. There is something wrong with the ships. Usually, a returning fleet is a cacophony of sailors shouting greetings to prostitutes, captains barking orders, and the general roar of men who haven't seen a tavern in 6 months. But these decks are eerily silent. It's the silence of a library. If the library was floating and smelled of bilge water and death. The lead galley approaches the pier. A rope is thrown sluggishly from the bow. It lands with a wet slap on the cobblestones near your feet. A dockhand picks it up to tie it off to a bollard, unaware that he has just shaken hands with the apocalypse. This is the moment. This is the turning point of history. It's not a grand explosion or a trumpet blast from the clouds. It's just a hemp rope touching a wet stone. You squint at the crew. They are slumped over their oars or leaning heavily against the gunwales. They look less like sailors and more like piles of dirty laundry that have been roughly arranging into human shapes. Their skin is dark, not with the healthy tan of a life at sea, but with a strange, sallow gray undertone. They move with the coordination of drunkards, but without the joy. Here is a mainstream historical fact that you are witnessing in real time. In October 1347, 12 Genoese galleys docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. They had come from the Black Sea, fleeing the siege at Kaffa we heard about earlier. They thought they had outrun the horror, but they had simply acted as a very efficient delivery service. They are the Typhoid Mary of the Middle Ages, but instead of a cook, it's an entire naval fleet. You take a step back. The smell hits you now. It's not just the usual harbor funk of tar and rotting seaweed. It is a sweet, cloying scent of corruption. It smells like a butcher shop that lost power 3 days ago. The harbor master, a man whose belly suggests he samples a lot of the import taxes personally, waddles down to the gangplank. He's yelling at the captain, asking for the manifest, asking why they look like they've been on a bender since Constantinople, but your eyes drift away from the humans. You are looking at the mooring ropes. There is movement there. Small dark shapes are tightrope walking down the lines from the ship to the shore. Rats. Rattus rattus, the black rat. In your world, rats are just a fact of life, like taxes or rain. They are everywhere. They live in your roof, they eat your grain, and they occasionally bite your toes while you sleep. You don't think much of them. They are just the squirrels of the gutter. However, historians and scientists still argue about the mechanics of what happens next. The traditional narrative, the one you'll hear for centuries, blames these rats exclusively. But modern research suggests the spread was so fast, moving kilometers a day, that rats alone couldn't account for it. Some argue it must have been an airborne strain immediately, or perhaps human-to-human transmission via body lice and fleas was the primary driver, making the rat somewhat of a scapegoat. But standing on the dock, watching that first rat scurry onto the cobblestones, you don't care about the academic nuance. You just see a creature that looks mangy, twitchy, and desperate. Here is a quirky tidbit you definitely don't know yet. The flea living on that rat, the Xenopsilla chiopis, is having a really bad week. The plague bacteria, Yersinia pestis, has multiplied in the flea's gut, creating a blockage. The flea is starving to death because it can't swallow blood past the blockage. So in a frenzy of hunger, it jumps off the dying rat and bites the nearest warm thing, which happens to be the harbor master's ankle. It tries to drink, fails, and regurgitates the bacteria-filled sludge back into the wound. It is a microscopic biological glitch that is about to kill half the continent. The sailors are starting to disembark now. Some are being carried. You see a man's shirt slip open, revealing a swelling in his armpit the size of an apple. It's black and oozing. The locals recoil. A murmur goes through the crowd on the dock. "What is that?" someone whispers. "Is it leprosy? Is it a curse?" It's panic in its embryonic form. The Messina authorities, to their credit, are about to figure it out quickly. Within a day or two, they will realize these ships are poison and order them expelled from the harbor. But it's like trying to unpee in a swimming pool. The rats are already ashore. The fleas are already hopping. The cargo, bales of silk and fur which are perfect luxury hotels for insects, is being unloaded. You decide you don't need fish that badly. The air feels too thick. You feel a strange urge to wash your hands, a concept that is practically revolutionary in 1347. You back away, leaving the harbor master to his argument. He's shouting about quarantine fees, unaware that he will be dead by Tuesday. The galleys bob in the water, their wood creaking innocent vessels of doom. You walk back up the hill toward the city center. The streets are narrow, winding, and crowded. You brush shoulders with a sailor who stumbled past you, heading for the nearest tavern. He breathed on you. You felt the warmth of his feverish exhalation. You brush off your shoulder, annoyed. You think about the pottage waiting for you at home. You think about the rumors. They aren't rumors anymore. They are right there, drinking ale in the pub by the waterfront. The city of Messina is about to die, and from here, the sickness will jump to the mainland, then to France, then to England. It will follow the trade routes like a dark shadow. But for you, in this specific moment, the horror is silent. It's just a rat vanishing into a pile of trash. It's just a sailor coughing. It's just a flea looking for a new host. You scratch your leg absent-mindedly. It itches. Probably just a mosquito bite, right? Yeah, probably. And as night falls, the bells of the cathedral ring out. They sound mournful tonight. You lock your door, sliding the heavy wooden bolt into place. You feel safe inside your walls. But you forget that walls are for keeping out people, not biology. Down in your cellar, where you keep the winter grain, something is rustling in the dark. A new tenant has moved in, and he brought billions of little friends. You wake up, and the first thing you notice is the silence. Usually, the city is a chaotic symphony of roosters, church bells, and people arguing over the price of turnips. But this morning, the volume knob has been turned down to a terrified whisper. The second thing you notice is the absence of the smell of baking bread. The communal oven down the street, usually firing up before dawn, is cold. This is a crisis. In the Middle Ages, bread isn't just a side dish. It's the main event, the plate, and the cutlery all rolled into one. If the baker isn't baking, civilization is approximately 3 hours away from collapse. You decide to investigate. You pull on your boots, which are essentially just leather sacks for your feet, and step out into the street. It's a gray, damp morning, the kind of weather that makes you feel like you're living inside a wet wool sock. You head toward the baker's house. His name is Thomas, a robust man who usually has flour in his beard and a joke about the abbot's waistline on his lips. You knock on his door. No answer. You push it open. In these times, locks are for the rich, and privacy is a concept that won't be invented for another few centuries. The air inside the cottage is thick, humid, and smells wrong. It's a mixture of unwashed bodies, standard for the era, and something else, something sweet and metallic like copper coins left in a jar of honey. Thomas is lying on his pallet in the corner. He looks like he's just run a marathon while wearing a suit of armor. He's sweating, shivering, and mumbling something about the price of rye. You step closer, holding your breath. This is where you get your first anatomy lesson of the pandemic. Thomas's shirt is torn open, and you see it. Under his left arm, in the soft hollow of the armpit, there is a lump. It's not a subtle swelling. It's the size of a goose egg, angry, purple, and black, straining against the skin like it wants to escape. This is the bubo. It is the signature autograph of Yersinia pestis. Here is the mainstream historical fact regarding what you are looking at. The bubo is actually a swollen lymph node. Your lymphatic system is basically the body's security checkpoint, where immune cells arrest bad guys. But the plague bacteria are like a riot that overruns the police station. They multiply so fast that the node swells, fills with pus and blood, and eventually turns necrotic, black. Hence, the Black Death. It appears most commonly in the groin, armpits, or neck because those are the primary drainage sites for the lymphatic system. It is excruciatingly painful. Imagine having a migraine, but the migraine is a physical object lodged in your armpit. Thomas groans. He tries to sit up, but the pain forces him back down. You want to help him. You want to offer him water or a wet rag. But your survival instinct, a lizard brain reflex that predates your ability to do calculus or write poetry, screams at you to run. You freeze. He looks at you, his eyes glassy and unfocused. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit about medieval medical beliefs. You instinctively look away from his eyes. Why? Because many doctors and scholars of the time believe in the optical theory of transmission. They think the pestilence is a spirit or a vapor that can be shot from the eyes of a sick person into the eyes of a healthy one, like a laser beam of sickness. They literally believe a dying man can kill you just by making eye contact. It sounds ridiculous to you, like believing the earth is round. Oh wait, they actually knew that. But in the heat of the moment, you aren't taking any chances. You stare resolutely at his earlobe. Thomas coughs. It's a wet, rattling sound that seems to come from the bottom of his soul. He spits, and a splatter of bloody phlegm hits the straw floor. You scramble backward, knocking over a stool. This is the moment the game changes. If he just had the buboes, he might have the bubonic plague, which has a mortality rate of about 50 to 60%. Not great odds, basically a coin flip with your life, but survivable. But if he's coughing up blood, that's pneumonic plague. That means the bacteria have moved into his lungs. The mortality rate for that is effectively 100%. And worse, every time he coughs, he is aerosolizing the death. He is a biological crop duster, and you are the crop. You back out of the cottage, mumbling a confused apology that he probably doesn't hear. You burst back out into the cool, gray street. You gulp down the fresh air, trying to scrub the inside of your lungs with oxygen. Your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. You've seen it. It's real. It's not just a story from the East anymore. It's Thomas, who owes you a ladder, and he is definitely not going to return that ladder. You run back to your own house and bolt the door. You are seized by a frantic, narcissistic paranoia. You tear off your tunic. You have to check. You stand in the dim light of your main room, twisting your body into impossible yoga poses to inspect your own lymph nodes. You jam your fingers into your armpits, probing for lumps. You press into your groin, checking for swelling. You feel your neck. Is that a lump? No, that's just a muscle. Is that a dark spot? No, that's a freckle you've had since you were 6. Wait, do you feel warm? You touch your forehead. It feels normal, but maybe your hand is hot so you can't tell. You lick your wrist to see if it tastes feverish, a completely useless diagnostic tool, but you do it anyway. Historians still argue about the speed of the disease's progression. The Italian writer Giovanni Boccaccio, who witnessed the plague in Florence, famously wrote that victims ate lunch with their friends and dinner with their ancestors in paradise. Some modern researchers think this was poetic hyperbole, a writer being dramatic for clicks. Others argue that in a population with zero immunity and widespread malnutrition, the septicemic form of the plague really could kill within hours, causing victims to drop dead in the streets before a bubo even had time to form. You really hope Boccaccio was just being dramatic. You sit down on your chest, panting. You feel an itch on your leg, a phantom itch. You scratch it furiously. You are perfectly healthy, but your brain is convincing you that you are dying. This is the psychological torture of the Black Death. It's not just the disease, it's the anticipation. Every headache, every sneeze, every stiff joint becomes a death sentence in your mind. You are trapped in a body that feels like a ticking time bomb. You look at your own hands. They look the same as they did yesterday, rough, calloused, dirt under the fingernails. But they feel alien. You realize that you can't trust your own biology. You can't trust the air. You can't trust your neighbors. You are suddenly profoundly alone in a city of thousands. And the worst part, you're hungry. The panic has burned through your breakfast calories, and your stomach growls. It's a cruel joke. How can you be hungry at the end of the world? You go to your pantry to find some hard cheese. As you chew, you find yourself checking your armpit again. Just to be sure, it's become your new nervous tick. Check the door, check the fire, check the armpits. Welcome to your new routine. Outside, you hear a cart rumbling over the cobblestones. It's not a merchant cart, it's moving too slowly. And you hear a bell ringing, not the church bell, but a small hand bell. Clang, clang, clang. It's the sound of the new municipal authority. They are coming to mark the houses. You hold your breath and listen as the wheels creak past your door and stop at Thomas's house. You hear shouting, then the sound of wood being hammered into wood. They are boarding him in. You swallow the cheese. It tastes like sawdust. You realize that surviving the infection is only half the battle. Now you have to survive the cure. And the cure, as you are about to find out, involves a lot of vinegar, bad smells, and logic that makes absolutely no sense. But for now, you are lump-free. You have won the lottery for one more day. You are currently on your hands and knees, scrubbing the floorboards of your cottage with a manic intensity usually reserved for someone trying to hide a crime scene. In a way, you are. You are trying to scrub away the crime before it happens. Your weapon of choice is vinegar, gallons of it. You have raided your pantry, and now your entire house smells like a fish and chip shop that has been left in the sun. The sharp, acidic tang stings your nose and makes your eyes water, but you welcome the burn. To you, that burn smells like safety. You are fighting the invisible enemy, miasma. In the 14th century, nobody knows what a germ is. If you tried to explain to a medieval doctor that tiny, invisible bugs were living in his beard and killing people, he would probably bleed you to balance your humors and then have you committed for lunacy. Instead, the prevailing scientific consensus is the miasma theory. This theory posits that the plague is caused by bad air, corrupt, rotting vapors that rise from the earth, usually triggered by earthquakes or those pesky planetary alignments we mentioned earlier. This corrupted air enters your pores when you breathe or bathe, which is why you've stopped bathing entirely, congratulations, and poisons your internal fluids. So your strategy is simple: chemical warfare against the atmosphere. You dip your rag into the bucket. The vinegar is cold and murky. You scrub the wood grain, digging the dirt out of the cracks. You are convinced that if you can just make the house smell sharp enough, the bad air will bounce off your door like a confused bird hitting a window. You wash the table. You wash the stools. You wash the handle of your knife. You are basically pickling your entire existence. Here is a mainstream historical fact to anchor your cleaning frenzy. The medical faculty of the University of Paris, the supreme authority on health, released a compendium in 1348 advising people to purify their homes using fire and aromatics. They specifically recommended burning vinewood, green laurel, or frankincense to counteract the heavy, poisonous air. Following their advice, you have turned your small fireplace into a botanical incinerator. You stand up, your knees cracking like dry twigs, and throw another handful of dried rosemary onto the hearth. The fire hisses and pops, sending up a thick white plume of smoke. It smells lovely, actually, like a roasted lamb dinner, minus the lamb. But the room is now hazy. The smoke hangs in the rafters, creating a gray ceiling. You cough, but it's a healthy cough, or so you tell yourself. You are smoking yourself like a side of salmon. The logic is that the thick smoke creates a barrier, a physical shield that the miasma cannot penetrate. You are effectively hotboxing your house with potpourri. You walk over to the window. It is shuttered tight. You have stuffed rags into the cracks to prevent any drafts. In your mind, fresh air is death. The breeze is a serial killer. This is the exact opposite of what modern ventilation science would recommend, but you are working with the best data you have. You feel a draft coming from the bottom of the door, a tiny ribbon of cool air touching your ankle. You panic, you grab a towel, soak it in vinegar, and jam it into the gap. You step back, breathing heavy, vinegar-scented breaths. You are safe. You are hermetically sealed in a dark, smoky, vinegar-marinated box. However, historians still argue whether these desperate measures actually did some good, albeit accidentally. While the miasma theory was wrong about the mechanism, burning strong aromatics like laurel, pine, and rosemary produces smoke that acts as a mild insect repellent. By turning your house into a smokehouse, you might inadvertently be discouraging the fleas from hopping off the rats and onto you. You are doing the right thing for the wrong reason, which is basically the theme of the entire Middle Ages. But the anxiety doesn't stop at the door. You look at your coins. You have a small pouch of silver pennies and a few groats. You need to buy food eventually, but you are terrified to touch the money. Everyone touches money. The leper, the baker, the dying man on the quay. Money is the most traveled item in the city. So you dump the coins into a bowl of vinegar. You swirl them around. You are laundering money, literally. You scrub the face of the king stamped on the silver until he looks shiny and surprised. Then, there's the issue of your own breath. If the air is poison, every time you inhale, you are gambling. You need a filter. You pick up a pomander, which sounds fancy, but in your case, it's just a small linen bag filled with dried flowers and herbs. You tie it around your neck. The idea is that you can hold it to your nose whenever you have to go outside, creating a personal bubble of good smells to ward off the bad ones. It's the medieval equivalent of wearing an N95 mask, but instead of filtration material, it's full of dried daisies and wishful thinking. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit that shows just how desperate people got with this smell theory. Some doctors actually recommended the opposite approach. They suggested that if the bad air was sweet or cloying, you should fight it with something even more offensive to shock your system and overpower the miasma. This led to people spending hours sitting in latrines, inhaling the fumes of human waste, or keeping goats in their bedrooms to ensure the air was sufficiently pungent. Therapeutic inhalation of sewage was a genuine medical prescription. Fortunately, you have opted for the rosemary and vinegar route. You aren't quite desperate enough to huff the outhouse yet. Give it a week. You pace the floor. The smoke is stinging your eyes. You feel lightheaded, probably from the carbon monoxide building up in your unventilated room, but you interpret this dizziness as the safety shield working. You check the vinegar rag at the door. It's drying out. You rush to wet it again. Eternal vigilance is the price of not dissolving into black slime. You look at your reflection in the polished bottom of a brass pot. Your face is smudged with soot. Your hair is wild. You look like a mad wizard who has been trapped in a library fire, but you are alive. The vinegar burns the cuts on your hands, cuts you got from chopping the firewood. The pain is grounding. It focuses you. Outside, the world is quiet. The birds have stopped singing, or maybe you just can't hear them through the heavy oak shutters. You wonder what your neighbors are doing. Are they scrubbing too, or are they resigned to their fate? You feel a smug sense of superiority. You are taking action. You are a scientist of the home. You have created a fortress of acidity. But then, a thought strikes you. A terrible, gnawing thought. You looked at the floorboards. You looked at the door. You looked at the windows. But you didn't look up. You look at the thatched roof. Thatch is made of straw. It is warm. It is thick. It is exactly the kind of place a rat would love to build a nest. You hear a scratch, a tiny scuttling sound in the thatch, right above your head. It's soft, like sandpaper on dry leaves. You freeze. You look up at the ceiling, clutching your bag of posies. The vinegar can't help you up there. The smoke rises, but does it go deep enough into the straw? You realize that while you were fortifying the walls against the air, the enemy might have just been napping in the attic the whole time. You grab a broom and poke the ceiling. The scratching stops, then silence. Was it a bird, the wind, or was it the roommate from hell? You decide to throw more rosemary on the fire. You will make the smoke so thick that even the spiders start coughing. You sit down on your vinegar-soaked floor, pull your knees to your chest, and wait. The air is spicy, sour, and hot. It's the most uncomfortable you've ever been, and you pray it stays that way. You wake up with a headache that feels like a blacksmith is using your skull as an anvil. It's probably the carbon monoxide from your hermetically sealed, smoke-filled cottage, but in your panic, you assume it's the sickness. You check your armpits for the 40th time this hour. Nothing yet. But the paranoia is a heavy cloak, and you decide it's time to consult a professional. You need a doctor. Now, finding a doctor in the middle of the Black Death is like trying to find a plumber on Christmas Day, except the plumber is wearing a terrifying beak mask and holding a jar of leeches. You venture out, your vinegar-soaked rag pressed to your nose, navigating streets that are becoming increasingly empty of people and increasingly full of refuse. You arrive at the physician's house. There is a line, of course. People are coughing, weeping, and clutching various body parts. When you finally get to the front, you are ushered into a room that smells of dried blood, stale urine, and unearned confidence. The doctor is a man of science by 14th century standards. This means he has read Galen, a Greek guy who has been dead for 1,000 years, and consults a star chart before he checks your pulse. He is wearing a long robe, and while he isn't wearing the iconic beak mask yet, mainstream historical fact check, those steampunk nightmare plague doctor costumes with the beak and the goggles actually originate from the 17th century outbreak, not the medieval one. He still looks intimidating. He peers at you, squinting in the dim light. I feel off, you say vaguely. He nods sagely. He asks for a urine sample. You provide it in a glass flask. He holds it up to the light, swirling it like a sommelier inspecting a vintage Merlot. He frowns. Your humors are imbalanced, he declares. Too much blood. The heat is trapped inside. We must release it. Ah, bloodletting. The universal solution to everything from headaches to heartbreak. The logic is that your body is a container of 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, and sickness is just an overflow issue. The solution? Pull the plug and drain the tank. He produces a phlegm, a nasty little metal tool that looks like a cross between a scalpel and a can opener. You sit in a chair. He ties a tourniquet around your arm. You watch as he expertly slices into a vein. The blood flows into a brass bowl. Drip, drip, drip. You feel lighter, but mostly because you are losing the fluid that carries oxygen to your brain. He takes about a pint. There, he says, bandaging you with a rag that looks debatably clean. The fever will leave with the blood. Spoiler alert, it won't. If you actually had the plague, weakening your body by draining your blood is roughly the equivalent of fighting a house fire by punching holes in the water hose. But it feels proactive, and that counts for something. But he's not done. He turns to his shelf of wonders. For the prevention, he says, you must take the theriac. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Theriac, or Venetian treacle, is the most expensive and complex medicine in the world. It is a fermented paste made from up to 64 ingredients, including viper flesh, opium, roasted copper, dried toad powder, and enough honey to make it palatable. It is aged for years. It is essentially a magical smoothie of random items found in a wizard's pantry. Kings eat this stuff on toast. The doctor offers you a small pot for a price that makes your eyes water. You buy it. You will eat the snake paste. You will eat anything if it means not dissolving. He also suggests a poultice for your lymph nodes, just in case. The recipe? A mixture of tree resin, white lily roots, and dried human excrement. To draw out the poison, he explains. You nod politely, deciding right then and there that you will stick to the vinegar. The line between medicine and madness is very thin right now, and this doctor is jump roping with it. Historians still argue about the psychological impact of these doctors. On one hand, they were helpless. Their treatments were useless or harmful. But on the other hand, they provided a sense of order. In a world falling apart, a man in a robe telling you to eat treacle gave you a script to follow. It was better than hearing, I don't know, good luck. Some historians even argue that the placebo effect of these elaborate cures might have saved a few people simply by reducing their stress levels, keeping their immune systems from crashing entirely. As you leave, you see the doctor treating another patient. He is placing a live chicken against the man's buboes. This is the Vickery method. Shave a chicken's butt and press its bare skin against the plague sore. The belief is that the chicken will absorb the poison. The chicken looks unhappy. The patient looks hopeful. You walk out, feeling the throb in your bandaged arm and the lightness in your coin purse. You walk home, feeling woozy. The bloodletting has made you dizzy. The streets seem to tilt. You pass an apothecary shop. The window is smashed, a sign of things to come. People are starting to realize that the medicine isn't working. The expensive theriac isn't saving the nobles. The prayers aren't saving the priests. The chickens aren't saving anyone. You get back to your cottage and sit down. You open the pot of theriac. It smells like molasses and old shoes. You take a spoonful. It tastes bitter, sweet, and earthy. The opium kicks in after a few minutes, taking the edge off your panic. You feel a warm, fuzzy blanket wrap around your brain. Maybe the doctor knows what he's doing. Maybe it's the snake meat. Maybe it's just the drugs. You look at your bandaged arm. You wonder if you should have asked him about the preventative measures involving emeralds. You heard a rumor that crushing emeralds and drinking them in wine is a cure, but you can't afford emeralds. You can barely afford turnips. You are a budget survivor. You lie back on your bed. The world spins gently. You realize that medicine in the 14th century is really just polite torture with a theology degree. They hurt you, take your money, and then tell you it's God's will if you die. It's a great business model. But as you drift off into an opium-tinged nap, you hold on to the hope that the bloodletting worked. You feel drained, empty. Maybe the sickness was drained out too. You close your eyes. Outside, the death cart rumbles past again. Bring out your dead. You pull the blanket up. Not today, cartman. I have snake paste. I am invincible. But deep down, in the sober part of your brain that the opium hasn't reached, you know the truth. The doctor is just guessing. The king is just guessing. You are on your own, and your arm really, really hurts. You are standing in the middle of your cottage, looking at your possessions, and realizing that almost everything you own is heavy, flammable, or useless. The city has turned on you. What was once a hub of commerce and community is now just a densely packed waiting room for the graveyard. The church bells are ringing constantly now, a ceaseless, mournful drone that rattles your teeth. You've scrubbed the floors, you've eaten the snake paste, you've bled into a bowl, but the death cart is getting heavier every night. It's time to pull the ripcord. It's time to run. The decision to flee isn't taken lightly. In the medieval mindset, your identity is tied to your location. You are John of here or William of there. If you leave here, who are you? You become a vagabond, a masterless man, a suspicious figure likely to be hanged for stealing a chicken you haven't even met yet. But the alternative is staying here and waiting for your lymph nodes to explode. So you choose homelessness over biological combustion. You start packing. This is the ultimate test of minimalism. You have a sack made of rough hemp. Into it goes the survival kit, a flint and steel, because freezing to death is a boring way to die, a small iron knife for cutting cheese and/or bandits, and your remaining food supply, a hard lump of cheese that could be used as a blunt weapon, and a bag of dried apples. You look at your heavy winter cloak. It's itchy and smells like wet sheep, but it's your house now. You toss it over your shoulder. You look at the family Bible. It's heavy. You hesitate. It's valuable, and it might keep God on your side, but can you run with it? You decide to leave it. If God is everywhere, He can find you in the woods without the heavy reading material. You do, however, take your lucky spoon. It's wood, it's splintered, but you've survived 20-something years eating with it, so it's coming. You slip out of your door just before dawn. The mist is thick, swirling through the narrow alleys like a ghost train. You stick to the shadows. Leaving the city is technically not allowed. The authorities, in a desperate attempt to contain the panic and the tax base, have ordered everyone to stay put. Quarantines are in effect, though quarantine right now mostly just means locking the gates and hoping for the best. You approach the city gate. There are guards, but they look tired. One is leaning on his spear, staring blankly at a stray dog. You don't want to test them. If you try to pass, they might demand a health certificate, a slip of paper proving you are disease-free. Since you haven't seen a printer or a laminator lately, and these documents are mostly for the rich anyway, you have to improvise. You find a section of the city wall that is crumbling, infrastructure maintenance having taken a back seat to the apocalypse, and squeeze through a gap where the masonry has given way. You tumble out into the ditch on the other side. You are covered in mud. You scraped your knee and you smell like a swamp. But you breathe in. The air here tastes different. It's green. It smells of wet earth and pine needles, not rotting garbage and despair. You stand up and start walking. You don't look back. Looking back is for people who get turned into pillars of salt. Here is a mainstream historical fact to contextualize your jog. You are not the only one doing this. The wealthy and the nobility were the first to bail. King Edward III of England, for example, took his court and fled London for his various country estates, effectively running a government in exile from the countryside. The most famous piece of literature from this era, Boccaccio's The Decameron, is literally a story about 10 rich young Florentines who flee the plague-ridden city to hide out in a luxury villa and tell dirty stories to pass the time. You, unfortunately, do not have a luxury villa. You have a bush. As you trudge further away from the city walls, the roads are eerily empty of commerce, but peppered with other refugees. You see a family pushing a handcart piled high with pots and pans. You see a priest walking alone, clutching a crucifix. You give them a wide berth. In the countryside, social distancing is easy. You just walk on the other side of the field. However, historians still argue about whether this mass exodus actually saved people or doomed the countryside, while the rural death rates were generally lower than the urban ones simply due to population density. The fleeing refugees acted as vectors. You, with the flea potentially in your cloak, are bringing the nightmare to the villages that might have otherwise been spared. You think you are escaping the fire, but you might just be the spark carrying it to a new forest. You walk for hours. Your boots, which were not designed for cross-country hiking, are rubbing blisters on your heels. You are hungry, but you ration your cheese. You need to get deep into the woods, away from the roads, away from the villages where the sheriff might ask questions. You are aiming for the waste, the uncultivated land where the law of the king is just a rumor. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit about medieval travel safety. You might have sewn your coins as into the lining of your clothes. Banditry spiked during the plague. With the courts closed and the sheriffs dead or hiding, the roads became the Wild West. If you meet a stranger, you don't wave. You grip your knife. There are stories of plague bandits who would rob travelers and then strip them naked, leaving them to die of exposure. It's a harsh world. You touch the hem of your tunic, where your 3 silver groats are hidden. They jingle softly. You hope nobody heard that. By late afternoon, you reach the tree line. The forest is dense, ancient, and dark. In the medieval imagination, the forest is not a place of recreation. It's the realm of wolves, outlaws, and things that go bump in the night. It's where Hansel and Gretel get cooked. But compared to the city, it looks like paradise. You push through the underbrush, the branches whipping your face. You find a small clearing near a stream. This is it. This is your new address. You drop your pack. You sit down on a mossy log. The silence is profound. No carts, no shouting, no bells. Just the wind in the leaves and the sound of your own heavy breathing. You feel a strange sense of euphoria. You made it. You outsmarted the death trap. But then reality sets in. You are alone in the woods. You have no shelter. It's going to rain soon. You have no way to make more food once the cheese runs out. You realize that while you have escaped the biological predator, you have just entered the food chain of the ecological ones. You look at the stream. Is the water clean, or is there a dead sheep upstream? You don't know. You drink it anyway. It's cold and sweet. You gather some bracken and pile it up to make a bed. It's scratchy and full of bugs, but hey, at least they aren't plague bugs, probably. You curl up in your cloak, clutching your knife. As the sun sets, the temperature drops like a stone. You shiver. You wonder if the fever starts with shivering. No, you tell yourself. It's just the cold. It's just the damp earth seeping into your bones. You stare up at the canopy of trees. The stars are starting to poke through the branches. They are the same stars that look down on the dying city, but here they seem indifferent rather than accusing. You close your eyes, listening to the hoot of an owl. In folklore, owls are omens of death. Shut up, you whisper to the bird. I'm on vacation. You drift off to sleep, a fugitive in your own country, a survivalist with a cheese addiction, hoping that the rats don't like hiking as much as you do. You have survived the city, but now you have to survive the wild, and the wild doesn't care about your humors. You wake up in the woods, cold, stiff, and covered in dew. You feel like a human tea bag that's been left out overnight. But you are alive. No buboes, no fever, just a serious case of back pain and a craving for something warm that isn't your own breath. You decide to push on, maybe find a smaller hamlet that hasn't been hit yet, somewhere you can trade labor for a bowl of broth. After 2 days of wandering, eating berries that you hope aren't poisonous, if it tastes like burning, spit it out. You stumble upon a village, but something is wrong. There is a barrier across the main road, a hastily erected wall of thorny brush and logs, and there are men with crossbows standing guard. They don't look like the friendly neighborhood watch. They look terrified. You have walked straight into one of history's earliest, clumsiest attempts at a cordon sanitaire. Stand back, one of the guards shouts. His voice cracks. He's young, probably a farmhand, who was handed a weapon and told to shoot anything that sneaks. This village is closed by order of the Reeve. You raise your hands. I'm healthy, you shout, which is the classic line said by everyone carrying a deadly pathogen. I just need water. He raises the crossbow. That's a no. You back away, retreating to the edge of the clearing. You decide to skirt around the village, maybe observe from a distance. What you see is a community in the grip of a brutal new logic. This isn't just people hiding. This is organized isolation. You see a house on the edge of the village. The door is painted with a large white cross. This isn't decoration. This is a warning label. It means plague inside. You watch as a woman tries to open a window, but it's been nailed shut from the outside. A guard stands by the door, ensuring nobody goes in, and more importantly, nobody comes out. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The practice of quarantine, from the Italian quarantagiorni, meaning 40 days, eventually became standard, but early on, it was ad hoc and cruel. In some English villages and Italian city-states, authorities would literally wall up infected families inside their homes. They would pass food and water through a small window, but otherwise, the family was entombed with the dying. If the father got sick, the mother and children were locked in with him until they either died or, well, mostly until they died. You watch as a basket of bread is lowered on a rope from a long pole to the window of the marked house. The woman takes it with a hand that looks skeletal. She is weeping. You can't hear her sobs from this distance, but the body language is universal. It's a grim pantomime of despair. But the isolation goes further. You spot a group of people camped out in the fields beyond the village proper. They are sitting in a circle, spaced far apart. These are the suspects, People who might have coughed once in public or whose cousin's neighbor's dog looked sick. They have been banished from their homes to wait out the incubation period in the rain. It's the medieval version of a hotel quarantine, but the hotel is a muddy turnip field, and room service is a bucket of gruel left on a stump. You are witnessing the birth of public health policy, and like most newborns, it is ugly, screaming, and covered in muck. The community has decided that the survival of the herd is more important than the rights of the individual. If you are sick, you are no longer a person. You are a contagion vector. You have been dehumanized by a microbe. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. In some places, this paranoia led to plague testers. These were people, often older women who needed the money, hired to enter a house, inspect the bodies of the sick for buboes, and report back to the authorities. If they found a bubo, the house was sealed. These women were essentially the Grim Reaper's administrative assistants. They were feared and hated, often accused of spreading the disease themselves or looting the homes of the dead. It was the worst temp job in history. You hide in the bushes, munching on your last piece of hard cheese. You realize that your plan to find a safe haven was flawed. There are no safe havens. Every village is a fortress. Every stranger is an enemy. The social contract has been rewritten. The old rules of hospitality, where you offer a traveler a seat by the fire, are dead. Now, hospitality gets you killed. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of these local quarantines. In some cases, like the famous village of Ayam, though that's a later outbreak in 1665, self-imposed isolation stopped the spread to neighboring towns. But in 1348, with rats and fleas ignoring the roadblocks, these measures were often futile. The rats didn't read the do not enter signs. They just scurried under the brush piles, carrying the death right past the guards. As you watch, night falls. The guards light torches. The firelight flickers on their anxious faces. They are just as trapped as the people inside the houses. They are prisoners of their own fear. You feel a strange sense of pity for them. At least you are free to starve in the woods. They have to stand there and watch their neighbors die, knowing they might be next. You decide to move on. This village has nothing for you but arrows and suspicion. You slip away into the darkness, guided by the moonlight. You are becoming a ghost, drifting through the landscape, unseen and unheard. But as you walk, you hear a sound carried on the wind. It's not the silence of the woods. It's a low, rhythmic chanting. It sounds like a hive of angry bees or a football crowd that has suddenly found religion. It's coming from the road ahead. You pause. Curiosity wars with caution. The chanting grows louder. It's a Latin hymn, but it's being screamed rather than sung. Dies ira, dies illa, day of wrath, that day. You have found the flagellants. And if you thought the quarantine guards were intense, wait until you meet the guys who think the cure for the plague is a whip with metal spikes. You crouch behind a stone wall as the procession comes into view. Torches flare in the dark. A long line of figures, stripped to the waist, marches down the muddy road. They are beating themselves. Whack, whack, whack. The sound of leather hitting flesh echoes in the night. It is rhythmic, hypnotic, and horrifying. You decide to stay very, very still. Dealing with a panic-stricken village guard is one thing. Dealing with a mob of religious zealots on a blood-soaked road trip is entirely another. You press yourself into the mud, hoping they pass by. You are learning that in the apocalypse, the scariest things aren't the monsters. It's the people trying to save their souls. You are crouching behind a moss-covered dry stone wall, holding your breath until your lungs burn. The air is thick with the smell of pine resin, damp earth, and now, the metallic tang of fresh blood. The procession of flagellants is passing you just a few yards from your hiding spot. It is a spectacle of coordinated agony that makes modern extreme sports look like knitting circles. The group is led by a man holding a massive wooden cross. He looks like he hasn't slept since the First Crusade. Behind him, dozens of men and a few women on the periphery march in a strict double file. They are stripped to the waist, their skin in a tapestry of old scars and fresh wounds. They hold scourges, multi-tailed whips made of leather, often tipped with iron spikes or knotted with pieces of metal. Thwack. The sound is wet and heavy. They strike their own backs in unison. Thwack. They chant a low, mournful dirge, begging God for mercy, for an end to the pestilence. They believe that the Black Death is not a biological event, but a divine judgment. Humanity has been naughty, and God has sent the plague as a timeout. Their logic is that if they punish themselves enough, God won't have to. They are trying to outsource the suffering. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The flagellant movement, or the Brotherhood of the Cross, exploded in popularity during the Black Death. They were like a traveling rock band of misery. They moved from town to town, performing their rituals in public squares for 33 and a half days, one day for each year of Christ's life on earth. They had strict rules: no bathing, no changing clothes, no sleeping in soft beds, and absolutely no talking to women. It was the ultimate boys' trip, but with more bleeding and less beer. You watch, mesmerized and horrified. One man stumbles, his knees buckling, but the guy behind him just kicks him forward. There is a frantic energy to them. They are high on endorphins, pain, and religious ecstasy. The locals from the nearby village, the ones who wouldn't let you in, have come out to watch. They are kneeling by the roadside, dipping cloths in the flagellant's blood. They think it's holy. They think smearing a stranger's blood on their foreheads will protect them from the plague. You want to scream, "That is literally how you get the plague," but you don't. You stay quiet. You know that interrupting a religious frenzy is a great way to become the next target. This brings up a quirky, fringe tidbit. The church actually hated these guys. Pope Clement VI eventually issued a papal bull condemning them. Why? Because they were undermining the church's authority. If you can save your own soul by whipping yourself in a parking lot, who needs a priest? The flagellants were basically early Protestant punks, disrupting the monopoly on salvation. Plus, they had a nasty habit of inciting violence against Jewish communities, blaming them for the plague when the whipping didn't work. They were a dangerous, unpredictable mob masquerading as a choir. As the tail end of the procession passes, you notice stragglers. People who have joined the group simply because they have nowhere else to go. Desperate souls who think, well, my family is dead and my house is boarded up. I might as well join the circus of pain. One of them looks in your direction. His eyes are wild, rimmed with red. He pauses. You grip your knife. If he spots you, will he invite you to join, or will he accuse you of being a sinner who needs a forced scourging? He blinks, shakes his head, and trudges on. You exhale. The chanting fades into the distance, leaving only the smell of iron and sweat hanging in the mist. You wait for an hour before moving. You are shaken. The world has gone mad. It's not just the sickness anymore. It's the reaction to the sickness. The social fabric is tearing apart, revealing the raw, ugly lining underneath. Rationality has left the building. You realize that to survive, you need to avoid not just the rats, but the cures. You continue your journey, but your destination has changed. You are looking for a village, for society. Now, you realize society is a dangerous place. You need to find a ghost town, a place where the plague has already burned through, where the people are gone, but the resources might remain. You are becoming a scavenger. By dawn, you reach a larger town. The gates are open, no guards. This is a bad sign, or a good sign, depending on your perspective. You walk in. The silence is heavy, pressing against your eardrums. It's not the quiet of sleep. It's the quiet of a tomb. You walk down the main street. Doors hang open on broken hinges. A cart is overturned, spilling rotted cabbages into the gutter. There are bodies, not fresh ones, but skeletal remains that have been picked clean by animals. The smell has faded to a dry, dusty musk. The initial wave of death happened weeks or months ago here. You step into a baker's shop. The oven is cold. There is flour spilled on the floor, hardened into a white crust by the damp. You find a sack of grain in the corner that the rats haven't totally destroyed. You grab a handful. It's stale, but it's food. You shove it into your mouth, chewing dry wheat like a horse. Then you hear it. A bell, not a church bell, but a small, tinkling handbell. You freeze. Is it the death cart? No. The town is empty. You look out the window. A priest is walking down the street. He is alone. He is swinging a censer of incense and ringing a bell. He is performing the last rites for the entire town. You watch him. He stops at a doorway, makes the sign of the cross over a bundle of rags that used to be a person, and moves on. He looks exhausted, his vestments stained and torn. He is the last functionary of the old world, clocking in for a shift that never ends. Historians still argue about the role of the clergy during the plague. While some priests fled, you can't blame them, really, many stayed and died with their flocks. The mortality rate for priests was massive. Some estimates say 40 to 50%, because they were the ones leaning in to hear the final confessions of the dying, inhaling the miasma directly from the source. This massive die-off led to a shortage of clergy, forcing the church to hastily ordain inexperienced men, and in some rare, desperate cases, allowing women to hear confessions, which arguably lowered the quality of the priesthood for generations. You feel a strange kinship with this lone priest. He is a survivor too, but you don't approach him. He is dealing with the spiritual cleanup. You are dealing with the physical one. You are looting the dead to feed the living. You slip out the back of the bakery, clutching your stolen grain. You find a well. You draw water. It's clear. You drink. You wash the mud off your face. You look at your reflection. You look older. Your eyes are harder. You are adapting. You are becoming a creature of the post-plague world. But as you wipe your face, you smell it again. The scent of sweet rot. It's faint, but it's there. You look around. The wind shifts. The smell gets stronger. You realize that the town isn't just empty. It's waiting. The bodies haven't all been buried. The shallow trenches behind the church are overflowing. The earth itself is rejecting the dead. You need to leave. This place is a graveyard with a zip code, but before you go, you spot something in the mud near the well. A nosegay, a small bunch of dried herbs tied with a ribbon. Someone dropped it, someone who was trying to protect themselves from the smell, from the sickness. It lies there, trampled and useless. You pick it up. It smells faintly of lavender and despair. You tuck it into your belt. a souvenir from the end of the world. You head back out the gate, leaving the priest to his bell and the dead to their silence. The road stretches on. You have grain in your belly, but the hunger for safety is a hole that can't be filled. You are standing at the gates of a major city. Let's call it London, or Paris, or perhaps just the Big Stink. You thought the countryside was bad, with its silence and its hungry wolves, but the city offers a new kind of sensory assault. Before you even see the spires of the cathedral or the stone walls, you smell it. It is a physical wall of odor that hits you in the face like a wet mattress. If you've ever been to a music festival on the third day, walking past the portable toilets in 100-degree heat, you have experienced a faint, polite whisper of what this city smells like. Multiply that by 100, add the scent of rotting meat, unwashed wool, and wood smoke, and you are starting to get close. This is the olfactory soundtrack of the apocalypse. You tie your scarf tighter around your face. You reach into your belt and pull out that dried nosegay you found earlier, but it's not enough. You need an upgrade. You scrounge near the city walls, finding some wild rue and a handful of wormwood. These herbs are bitter, pungent, and smell like chemical cleaner. You crush them into a ball and shove them into your makeshift mask. You look like a bandit who really likes potpourri, but fashion is the least of your worries. You step into the streets. The ground is soft. Not mud soft, but sludge soft. The cobblestones have disappeared under a layer of muck that defies description. In normal times, medieval cities had systems in place. They had rakers, men paid to scrape the streets, and gong farmers who cleaned out the cesspits. It wasn't modern sanitation, but it was a system. Here is a mainstream historical fact. When the plague hit, the municipal workforce was the first to collapse. The rakers and gong farmers died or fled. The result was that the city's metabolism stopped. The waste, human, animal, and commercial, just stopped moving. It piled up in the streets, in the gutters, and in the courtyards. The city became constipated. You navigate this terrain with the grace of a drunk ballerina. You step on a high stone, then leap to a doorway, trying to keep your boots out of the soup flowing down the center of the lane. It's a game of it. The floor is lava, except the lava is made of raw sewage and potential death. As you move deeper into the city, the smell changes texture. It gets sweeter. You pass a tanner's district. Usually, tanneries smell like urine, which was used to cure the leather, but today the vats are stagnant. The skins are rotting in the solution. You gag, pressing the wormwood hard against your nostrils until your eyes water. You see people, but they are silhouettes in the smog. Everyone is holding something to their face. Some have fancy pomanders, silver balls filled with musk and ambergris. Others, like you, are clutching bunches of herbs. It looks like a bizarre garden party where everyone hates each other. You lock eyes with a merchant. He is holding a sponge soaked in vinegar to his nose. He looks at your pathetic bunch of weeds. You look at his sponge. There is a moment of mutual recognition. We are breathing the same poison. He hurries past, eager to get indoors. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit about the aromatic defenses of the time. People became obsessed with specific scents for specific times of day. It was believed that heavy scents like storax and libidinum were best for the morning to wake up the heart, while lighter scents like rose and violet were for the evening. There were literal plague perfume sommeliers advising the wealthy on which scent profile would best repel the miasma at 2 o'clock p.m. You, however, are stuck with the ode to roadside weed for all occasions. You turn a corner and nearly trip over a cart. It's abandoned. The horse is gone, likely eaten, and the cart is piled high with refuse. It's a monument to the failure of infrastructure. You realize that civilization is, at its core, just a series of agreements to take the trash out. When those agreements break, civilization dissolves into sludge very quickly. Historians still argue about the role of this filth in the plague's spread. For centuries, the filth theory prevailed that the dirt itself bred the disease. Modern science knows that Yersinia pestis is vector-borne, fleas, rats, or pneumonic. However, the breakdown of sanitation created a paradise for the rats. The garbage piles were essentially luxury condos for the rodent population, allowing them to breed unchecked and bringing the fleas closer to the humans. So, while the smell didn't kill you, the things loving the smell definitely did. You feel a wave of nausea. It's not the plague, it's just the sheer biological overload. You duck into an alleyway to catch your breath, but the alley is worse. It's a dead end, literally and figuratively. You see the darker shapes of bundles stacked against the wall. You don't look too closely. You know what they are. You press your back against the cold stone of a building. You feel tiny. The city feels like a living, malevolent organism that is digesting you. You wonder why you came here. You came for food, for walls, for safety, but the walls just trap the smell. A dog trots past you. It looks healthy, suspiciously healthy. It stops, sniffs the air, and looks at you. You realize the dog is thriving. The breakdown of human order is the golden age of the stray dog. It's a stark reminder that nature doesn't care about your tragedy. It just adapts to the new food source. You push off the wall. You need to get to the market square. If there is food, it will be there. You wade back into the street. The muck sucks at your boots with a squelching sound. Squelch, squelch. It's the sound of a city surrendering. You pass a group of people burning a bonfire in the middle of the street. They are throwing furniture, clothes, and herbs into the flames. The smoke mixes with the stench, creating a choking smog. They are trying to purify the air, but they look like they are holding a vigil for the end of the world. One of them throws a handful of sage into the fire. The scent hits you for a second, crisp, clean sage, before it's swallowed by the rot. It's a heartbreaking reminder of a clean kitchen, of a Sunday roast, of a life that feels 1,000,000 years ago. You finally reach the square. It's less crowded than usual, but there is activity. People are moving fast, buying what they can, not lingering. The casual browsing of the past is gone. This is combat shopping. You spot a stall selling dried fish. The fish smells like salt and the sea. It cuts through the city funk like a laser. You head toward it, your stomach cramping with hunger. But as you approach, the wind shifts. It brings a new scent from the direction of the river. It's the smell of the mass graves that have been dug in the marshy ground outside the walls. It is a sweet, heavy, cloying scent that coats the back of your throat like syrup. It is the scent of mortality. You stop. You can't escape it. It's in your clothes, in your hair, in your pores. You realize that you will never smell clean again. Even if you survive this, the memory of this smell will haunt you. Every time you smell rotting flowers or stagnant water for the rest of your life, you will be back here in the mud, clutching a handful of weeds, listening to the squelch of doom. You buy the fish. You don't haggle. You throw the coins at the merchant and run. You need to find a high place, a roof, a tower, anywhere where the air might be thinner. You scramble up a set of stone steps to the city ramparts. The wind is stronger here. You gasp, filling your lungs with air that is only 40% terrible instead of 90%. You look out over the city. It looks peaceful from up here. The slate roofs glisten in the damp light, but you know the truth. Down there, in the maze, the sanitation department has resigned and the rats are running the show. You take a bite of the dried fish. It's tough and salty. It tastes like survival. You are sitting on the cold stone of the ramparts, picking a piece of dried fish out of your teeth. The salt burns your tongue, and while your stomach has stopped making that noise like a dying bagpipe, you are far from satisfied. You have protein, sure, but your body, conditioned by generations of peasant genetics, is screaming for one specific thing: carbs. You need bread. In the medieval world, bread isn't just a food group. It is the structural integrity of your day. It's the plate you eat off, literally, if you use trenchers. It's the bulk of your calories, and it's the only thing that makes the ale palpable. But looking down at the city from your high perch, you realize the smoke rising from the chimneys is too thin. The massive communal ovens, which usually roar to life before dawn to feed the city's hunger, are cold. The supply chain hasn't just been disrupted, it has been deleted. You descend from the wall, driven by a primal need for a loaf of rye. You head toward the mill district by the river. Usually, this area shakes with the rumble of water wheels grinding grain into flour. Today, the river flows past the wheels, but the gears are locked. The miller, a man who usually holds the neighborhood in a stranglehold of monopoly pricing, is gone. The door to the mill swings open in the breeze, creaking like a horror movie sound effect. You step inside. The air is thick with white dust, flour that has settled over everything like snow. It's quiet. You dip your hand into a bin. It's full of grain, wheat, golden and hard. This is the cruel irony of the plague economy. The raw materials are right here. The harvest was brought in before the worst of the dying started. The silos are full. But the human machine required to turn this hard kernel into a soft, edible loaf has broken down. Here is a mainstream historical fact to chew on while you stare at the useless wheat. Following the Black Death, Europe experienced a bizarre economic phenomenon where grain prices initially fluctuated wildly, but the cost of processed goods and labor skyrocketed. The grain is cheap because there are fewer mouths to eat it, but the bread is expensive because there is no one left to bake it. You are standing in the middle of a surplus that is functionally a famine. You grab a handful of raw wheat and chew it. It's like eating gravel. You risk cracking a molar, which, given the state of dentistry we discussed earlier, is a death sentence in itself. You spit it out. You need to find a bakery that might still be operating, or at least one that was abandoned mid-shift. You walk back into the maze of streets. You pass a butcher's stall. The butcher is gone, but the meat is still there. It's hanging on hooks, covered in a buzzing, iridescent blanket of flies. The smell is, let's just say it competes with the trench smell from the last section. You give it a wide berth. You are hungry, but you aren't risk a bout of dysentery hungry. Not yet. You turn a corner and almost collide with a cow. Just a cow, standing in the middle of a cobblestone street, looking confused. She is unmilked, her udder distended and painful, mooing softly at a statue of a saint. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit. The Black Death didn't just kill humans. It caused a massive ecological crisis for livestock. Sheep and cattle, were left to wander freely across the countryside and into towns because the shepherds and cowhands were dead. Wolves moved in to feast on the easy prey, but often the animals just died of neglect or a parallel murrain, animal plague, that struck the livestock at the same time. You are looking at a lonely urban cow who has technically inherited the earth, but she just wants to be milked. You consider trying to milk her, but you have no bucket, and honestly, you don't know how. You are a city dweller. Your relationship with milk ends at cheese. You pat her flank sympathetically and move on. You finally find a bakery. The door is smashed in. Looters beat you to it. You step over the debris. The shelves are bare. The flour sacks have been slashed open, their contents spilled on the floor and fouled by rats. But you spot something in the back. A trap door to a cellar. You lift it. It's heavy. You descend into the cool dark. It smells of yeast and earth. You strike your flint to light a rushlight. Shadows dance on the walls. In the corner, you see it. A barrel. You pry the lid off. It's full of hardtack, ship's biscuits. These are twice-baked slabs of flour and water, designed to survive a sea voyage to the Holy Land. They are hard enough to build a house with, but they are food. You grab a biscuit and gnaw on it. It tastes like dust and old cupboards, but as it softens in your mouth, the starch hits your bloodstream, and you feel a wave of relief. You stuff your pockets. You have struck gold. In 1348, a pocket full of stale biscuits makes you richer than the guy with the emeralds. But now, the thirst hits. The salty fish and the dry biscuit have turned your mouth into a desert. You can't drink the river water. That's where the city dumps its waste, and currently its bodies. You need ale. In the Middle Ages, everyone drinks ale, even kids, because the brewing process boils the water and the alcohol kills some of the nasties. It's liquid survival. You head for a tavern, the Broken Shield. You push the door open. It's dark. The benches are overturned. There is a body behind the bar, the landlord, face down in a puddle of his own product. You try not to look at him as you climb over the bar. You check the casks. Most have been tapped dry or smashed, but you find a small keg of high-quality wine hidden under a pile of rags. You pull the bung. The smell of red wine fills the stagnant air. You lift the keg and drink straight from the hole. It's rich, fruity, and strong. It's a vintage that would usually be reserved for a bishop, and here you are, a runaway with vinegar-soaked clothes, chugging it like it's Gatorade. This is the feast part of the apocalypse. The social hierarchy has collapsed, meaning the luxury goods are up for grabs. You are dining on ship's biscuits and fine wine. It's a terrible pairing, gastronomically speaking, but it feels like a victory. You sit on the floor of the tavern, leaning against a barrel, tipsy and full of dry bread. You listen to the silence of the city. It's unnerving. Usually, a tavern is the loudest place in town. Now, it's just you and the dead landlord. Historians still argue about the Malthusian check regarding this moment. Thomas Malthus, an economist way ahead in the future, would argue that Europe was overpopulated before the plague, with too many people fighting for too few resources. The argument goes that the Black Death, while horrific, actually fixed the economy by brutally reducing the labor supply, leading to the golden age of the peasant, where wages skyrocketed and food became plentiful for the survivors. You, sitting in the dark eating stolen biscuits, don't feel like you are entering a golden age. You feel like you are waiting for the other shoe to drop, and drop it does. You hear footsteps outside. Heavy ones, not the scuttling of rats. Boots. You blow out your light. You freeze. Through the cracks in the shutters, you see torchlight. It's a group of men. They aren't guards, and they aren't monks. They are carrying clubs and sacks. Scavengers. Plague loots. They are moving methodically from house to house, taking what the dead don't need anymore. You realize that you are sitting on a keg of wine that is worth more than a human life right now. If they find you, they won't ask for a sip. They will slit your throat for your hardtack. You scramble to the back of the tavern, looking for a back exit. You find a narrow door leading to a courtyard. You slip out just as the front door is kicked open. You hear them shouting, celebrating the discovery of the wine. You cling to the shadows, clutching your biscuits. You have eaten, you have drunk, but you have also realized that the danger isn't just microscopic anymore. The city has reverted to the state of nature. It's eat or be eaten, and you look delicious. You need to get out of the open. You need a place to digest your stolen carbs where nobody will look for you. A place nobody wants to go. A place so grim that even the looters avoid it. You look toward the churchyard, the gravedigger's domain. It's the last place anyone wants to be, which makes it the safest place for you. You take a bite of biscuit, wash it down with the lingering taste of expensive wine, and head toward the scent of fresh earth. You crouch behind a mossy, crooked tombstone, your heart beating a frantic rhythm against your ribs. The looters didn't follow you. Why would they? You have entered the one place in the city where the only currency is grief, and right now, the market is flooded. You are in the parish churchyard, or at least what used to be a churchyard. Now, it looks more like a chaotic construction site where the project manager quit 3 weeks ago and the blueprints were lost in a fire. The ground here is churned up, a sea of raw, dark earth that smells of wet clay and things you'd rather not think about. In normal times, a medieval funeral is a strict, bureaucratic affair. You die, the bell rings, the priest says the words, the family cries, and you get a nice, individual plot facing east, so you're ready to stand up when the Judgment Day trumpet blows. It's a system, it's dignified, but tonight, looking out over the mounds of soil, you realize that the bureaucracy of the afterlife has collapsed right alongside the bakery's supply chain. You watch the gravedigger. Let's call him Muddy John. He is a man who has clearly transcended exhaustion. He is moving with the mechanical, jerky efficiency of a wind-up toy that is running out of spring. He isn't digging graves. A grave implies a box for one person. Muddy John is digging a trench. It is a long, jagged scar in the earth, about 6 feet wide and 20 feet long. Here is a mainstream historical fact. As the death toll spiked in 1348, the consecrated ground of parish churchyards filled up almost instantly. The authorities had to consecrate new, emergency grounds, often called plague pits, outside the city walls or in open fields. In London alone, the emergency cemetery at East Smithfield swallowed thousands of bodies in a matter of months. Pope Clement VI, realizing the logistical nightmare, even consecrated the entire Rhone River in Avignon so bodies could be legally dumped into the water without damning their souls to hell. It was a theological loophole for mass disposal. You watch as a cart pulls up to the edge of the pit. It tilts. There are no coffins. Wood is too expensive, and carpenters are too dead. The bodies are wrapped in shrouds, mostly old linen sheets, sometimes just the clothes they died in. They slide out of the cart with a soft, heavy thud. It is a sound that has no echo. It just hits the ground and stops. Muddy John doesn't pray. He doesn't take off his hat. He just picks up his spade and starts arranging. This is the part that turns your stomach. He is playing a grim version of Tetris. He nudges a small bundle next to a large one, maximizing the space. Efficiency is the only virtue left. This brings us to a scholarly debate that archaeologists are still fighting over. Did they just dump the bodies, or was there care? For a long time, the Victorian image of the Black Death was one of total chaos, bodies thrown into pits willy-nilly. But recent excavations of plague pits show something surprising. Even in the height of the crisis, many bodies were laid out neatly, arms crossed, facing the correct religious direction. It suggests that even when the world was ending, the survivors tried to maintain a shred of humanity. They tried to keep the good death alive, even in a pit. But from where you are hiding, it doesn't look like a good death. In the medieval mind, the ars moriendi, the art of dying, is crucial. You need the priest, the confession, the candle, the family gathered around. To die alone and be thrown into a hole with strangers is the ultimate horror. It's the spiritual equivalent of having your identity stolen. You see Muddy John stop to wipe his forehead. He takes a swig from a flask. You wonder what he's drinking. Probably vinegar and wine, the same cocktail of survival you've been nursing. He looks down into the pit. Is he looking for someone he knows, or has he forgotten how to recognize faces? To him, the citizens of this town are just inventory. He is the warehouse manager of the dead. Then you see it, a quirk of the process that makes you shudder. Muddy John isn't filling the hole yet. He is sprinkling a thin layer of dirt over the row of bodies, just enough to cover the white shrouds. Then he gestures for the cart to dump the next load on top. This is the lasagna method of burial. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. To save space and labor, plague pits were packed in layers. Bodies, dirt, sometimes 5 or 6 layers deep. It was an engineering marvel of compression. But the problem was, as the bodies decomposed, the ground would sink. For decades after the plague, people walking over these pits would report the ground feeling spongy or uneven. You are literally watching the foundation of the future city being laid, and it is made of your neighbors. You squint through the gloom. The cart driver is tossing a bundle that looks familiar. It's a man, his shroud coming loose at the face. It's the spice merchant, the guy from the market square, the one who told you about the ships from the east, the man who started this whole journey for you. He looks smaller now, deflated. He falls into the pit, landing awkwardly on top of a baker. The irony hits you harder than the smell. He knew it was coming. He had the intel. He probably had the best spices to ward off the miasma. And yet, here he is, just another layer in the lasagna. It's a stark reminder that knowledge didn't save you. Money didn't save you. The only thing that saved you, so far, is dumb luck and a specific genetic mutation on your CCR5 gene, though you won't know about genetics for another 600 years, so you just call it God's favor. You feel a strange, hollow sensation. You aren't sad. You are too tired to be sad. You are just observant. You are witnessing the erasure of a community. These people had names, debts, favorite colors, petty feuds. Now they are just biomass. Muddy John finishes the layer. He starts shoveling the heavy clay back over the top. The sound of earth hitting cloth is rhythmic. Scritch, thud, scritch, thud. It's the heartbeat of the new world. You realize that staying here is safe from the looters, but it's dangerous for your mind. If you stare at the pit too long, you might just decide to climb in. It looks peaceful down there. No hunger, no rats, no running, just sleep. You shake your head, slapping your own cheek to break the trance. No. You have hardtack in your pocket and wine in your belly. You are alive. You are a biological miracle. You refuse to be inventory. You back away from the tombstone, moving quietly through the overgrown grass. You need to leave the dead to their business. You need to find the living. But as you slip out of the churchyard gate, you realize the city has changed again. The looters you heard earlier, they weren't an isolated incident. The silence of the early plague, the stunned, prayerful silence, is gone. It has been replaced by something louder, wilder, and much more dangerous. The shock has worn off, and the survivors have realized that if the police are dead and the priests are dead, then the laws are dead too. You hear glass breaking down the street. You hear laughter, manic, drunken laughter. You hear a drum beating, not a funeral drum, but a dance beat. The city isn't mourning anymore. It's partying. The social contract hasn't just been broken. It's been set on fire and thrown through a window. You are about to step into the medieval version of the purge, but with more loots and untreated infections. You clutch your knife. You thought the rats were the problem. You thought the gravedigger was grim, but you are about to meet the people who have looked at the apocalypse and said, "Let's have a drink." And they are terrifying. You step out of the churchyard and back into the street, expecting the silence to return, but instead, you walk straight into a fever dream. The city has undergone a vibe shift that is frankly terrifying. If the gravedigger was the embodiment of depression, the scene before you is the embodiment of manic psychosis. The streets are no longer empty. They are full of people, torchlight, and noise. But it's not the bustling commerce of the old days. It's the frantic, jagged energy of a society that has realized there are no consequences anymore. You press yourself into a doorway as a group of revelers stumbles past. They are singing a bawdy tavern song, their voices cracking with hysterical laughter. They are drunk, not just had a few ales after work drunk, but erasing the hard drive of their memories drunk. This is the medieval version of the YOLO philosophy, stripped of all irony and fueled by terror. You notice their clothes. It's a bizarre fashion show. One man is wearing a velvet doublet that is clearly 3 sizes too big for him, stained with wine and mud. A woman is wearing a silk headdress meant for a noblewoman, but she's paired it with a butcher's apron. They are looting the wardrobes of the dead. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit regarding medieval fashion police. Before the plague, Europe had strict sumptuary laws. These were laws that dictated exactly what fabrics and colors you could wear based on your income and class. If you were a peasant, wearing ermine fur or purple silk was literally a crime. But tonight, the police are dead, the judges are dead, and the guy who owned the ermine is currently the bottom layer of the lasagna in the plague pit you just left. The survivors are playing dress-up in the ruins. It's the ultimate act of social rebellion. You watch them dance. It's not a coordinated folk dance. It's a spasmodic, jerking movement. They grab each other, spinning in the mud, kicking up the filth. It looks less like celebration and more like a collective seizure. They are trying to outrun the silence. If they stop moving, they might have to think about their dead children or their rotting parents. So they dance until they collapse. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The Italian writer Giovanni Boccaccio vividly described this reaction in his Decameron. He wrote that while some people locked themselves up, like you did with your vinegar, others decided that the best medicine was to drink heavily, enjoy life to the full, go round singing and merrymaking, and gratify all of one's cravings. They invaded the houses of the rich, who had fled to their country estates, and treated them like public property. It was open house season on the aristocracy's wine cellars. You clutch your stolen hardtack. You feel incredibly uncool in your rough wool tunic. You are the designated driver at the end of the world. A man spots you. He's holding a silver goblet that probably belonged to a bishop. He waves it at you, spilling red wine down his stolen brocade vest. Drink, he screams. The devil is dead, or maybe God is. Who cares? He stumbles toward you, offering the cup. His eyes are wide, the pupils dilated. You smell him before he reaches you. It's a mix of sour sweat, expensive perfume dumped on to mask the smell, and the sweet, rotting scent of the plague that seems to cling to everyone now. You recoil. You don't know if his manic energy is just drunkenness or the delirium of the early stages of infection. You shake your head and back away. He laughs, a harsh barking sound, and throws the goblet at your feet. It clatters on the cobblestones. He spins around and grabs a woman, pulling her into a clumsy embrace. This is the breakdown of the great chain of being. In the medieval mind, everything had a place: god, king, noble, peasant, rock. But the plague is an equal opportunity killer. It killed the abbot just as fast as the plowman. This realization has shattered the psychological cage that kept people in line. If the virtuous die just as painfully as the sinners, why bother being virtuous? Why not steal the silver? Why not sleep with your neighbor's wife? Why not burn the tax records? Scholarly debate time. Historians still argue about the extent of this lawlessness. Chroniclers like Boccaccio might have exaggerated the debauchery to create a moral lesson, a look how fallen we are narrative, to explain why God was punishing them. Some modern historians argue that while crime spiked, most people were too busy dying or caring for the sick to actually hold massive street orgies. They suggest the lawless chaos was more of a literary trope than a universal reality. But standing here, watching a guy try to play a lute with a broken hand while wearing a stolen helmet, it feels pretty real to you. You keep moving, trying to skirt the edge of the party. You see a bonfire ahead. They aren't burning herbs anymore. They are burning ledgers. You squint. Yes, they have raided the town hall or a merchant's guild. They are burning debt records. This is the economic anarchy of the plague. With so many creditors dead and so many debtors dead, the survivors are seizing the moment to reset the financial clock. It's a jubilee by fire. You watch the parchment curl and blacken. Those papers represented generations of servitude, of owed labor, of taxes. Now they are just expensive kindling. You feel a twinge of temptation. You have debts. Everyone has debts. You could join them. You could grab a torch and burn the record of that time you didn't pay the tithe on your turnips. You could grab a velvet cloak and feel soft fabric against your skin for the first time in your life. You could drink until the fear goes away. But then you see it, on the edge of the firelight, a figure lying on the ground. It's one of the revelers. He's not sleeping off the booze. He is convulsing. His stolen silk shirt is torn, and you see the dark swelling on his neck. The others are dancing around him, stepping over him, ignoring him. The party isn't a cure. It's just a waiting room with better music. The denial is so thick you could cut it with a knife. They are pretending they are immortal, but the biology is catching up with them in real time. A fight breaks out near the wine cask. Two men are fighting over a woman, or maybe a loaf of bread. It's hard to tell. One pulls a knife. It's not a clumsy brawl, it's vicious. The blade flashes in the firelight. Blood sprays, mixing with the mud and the wine. The crowd cheers. They are starving for sensation, any sensation, to prove they are still alive. Pain, pleasure, violence, it's all the same to them now. You realize that this lawlessness is more dangerous than the silent, empty streets. In the silence, you only had to worry about the rats. Here, you have to worry about a drunk blacksmith with a nihilistic worldview and a stolen sword. The social contract hasn't just been broken, it's been replaced by the law of the jungle. You duck down a side alley, your heart hammering. You need to get away from the light. You prefer the honest gloom of the shadows. The sound of the laughter fades behind you, morphing into a grotesque echo that bounces off the stone walls. You check your pockets. The hardtack is still there. Your knife is still there. You are boring. You are a survivalist. You aren't wearing velvet. You aren't drunk, and that is why you might actually make it to next week. As you walk, you step in something sticky. You assume it's mud. You hope it's wine. You pray it's not what you think it is. You wipe your boot on a relatively clean patch of stone. You look up at the moon. It's indifferent. It's seen empires fall before. It's watching this one crumble with the same cold detachment. You need to find a way out of the city center. The party is a vortex, sucking people in and chewing them up. You need to find the edge, the fringe, the place where the humans are too scared to dance. You need to find the scapegoat, because when the party stops and the hangover sets in, the crowd is going to want someone to blame. And you don't want to be around when they start pointing fingers. You escape the manic party district, ducking into the dark, labyrinthine streets of the Jewish quarter, or what remains of it. The laughter and the music fade, replaced by a sound that is infinitely more terrifying, the low, vibrating growl of a mob that has found a purpose. If the revelers were running away from the horror through distraction, this new crowd is running toward it with a torch and a pitchfork. You press yourself into the shadows of a recessed doorway. Your heart is doing that thing again, where it tries to escape through your throat. You are watching the inevitable hangover of a society that has lost its mind. When the prayers didn't work, and the bloodletting didn't work, and the vinegar scrubbing didn't work, the survivors were left with a burning, unanswerable question. Who is doing this to us? It can't just be nature. Nature is boring. Nature is rain and turnips. This feels like a conspiracy. And in the 14th century, when bad things happen, the default setting of the collective consciousness is to find a minority group and blame them for poisoning the wells. You watch from your hiding spot as a group of men marches past. They aren't the looters from earlier. They are more organized, more self-righteous. They are carrying sledgehammers and axes. They aren't looking for wine. They are looking for conspirators. Here is a mainstream historical fact that is hard to stomach but necessary to understand the era. The Black Death triggered some of the most horrific pogroms in European history. Across Germany, Switzerland, and France, Jewish communities were accused of a massive international conspiracy to poison the water supply of Christendom. In cities like Strasbourg, Basel, and Cologne, thousands were rounded up and burned alive, often before the plague even arrived in the city. The logic was a preemptive strike. Kill the poisoners, and the plague won't come. Spoiler, the plague came anyway. You tremble as you see the glint of firelight on an axe head. You are a stranger here. You have a strange accent. You are carrying a suspicious bag of dried biscuits and a knife. To a terrified mob, you check a lot of the boxes for public enemy number one. You realize with a jolt that your survival kit looks suspiciously like a poisoner's kit. That nosegay of herbs? Evidence. That pouch of theriac? Obviously a vial of toxins. The mob stops at a house down the street. It's boarded up, like all the others, but they start hammering on the door. "Come out!" they scream. "We know what you did." You don't know who lives there. Maybe it's a Jewish family. Maybe it's a leper. Maybe it's just an old woman who looks a bit too much like a witch because she has a cat and understands herbal tea. The scapegoat logic is flexible. It expands to fit whoever is available and vulnerable. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit regarding the poison accusations. In some regions, the conspiracy theories got incredibly specific. The mobs weren't just looking for liquid poison, they were looking for anointers or untori. These were people accused of smearing a magical, plague-inducing grease on door handles, church pews, and walls. If you were seen touching a wall too lingeringly, or if you wiped your hands on a building, you could be lynched on the spot. You suddenly become very conscious of where you put your hands. You keep them tucked in your armpits. No touching. The door down the street splinters open. The mob rushes in. You hear shouting, the crashing of furniture, and then a scream that cuts through the humid night air like a jagged knife. It's a sound of pure terror. You squeeze your eyes shut. You want to intervene. You want to be the hero who steps out and says, "Stop! It's the fleas. It's the rats. Leave them alone." But you don't. Because you are a coward? Maybe. Or maybe because you know that rationality is a death sentence right now. If you defend the scapegoat, you become the scapegoat. So you stay in the shadows, breathing shallow breaths into your wool collar, complicit in your silence. Scholarly debate time. Historians have long argued about the motivation behind these attacks. Was it genuine religious hysteria, people truly believing that purging the heretics would appease God? Or was it cynical economics? Many of the leaders of these pogroms were local nobles or guild masters who owed massive debts to Jewish moneylenders. By burning the lenders, they burned the loans. The poisoning charge might have just been a convenient cover story for the world's most brutal debt cancellation scheme. Watching the men drag a chest of coins out of the house along with the terrified occupants, you lean toward the economic cynicism theory. The mob drags a man and a woman into the street. They are pleading. The man is shouting that he drinks from the same well as everyone else, that his children are dying too. It doesn't matter. Facts are irrelevant. The mob needs a catharsis. They need to feel like they are doing something, fighting back against the invisible killer. Killing a neighbor feels like action. It feels like a solution. You watch as they drag the couple toward the river. You know what's going to happen. You turn away, retreating deeper into the alley. You feel a wave of nausea that has nothing to do with the smell of the city. It's a spiritual nausea. You are witnessing the absolute nadir of human behavior. The plague kills the body, but the fear kills the soul. You stumble over a loose cobblestone and make a noise. A clatter. One of the men at the back of the mob turns around. He holds a torch high. "Who goes there?" he bellows. You freeze. The light catches you. You are illuminated in your muddy boots and your peasant tunic. You look guilty. Everyone looks guilty in torchlight. "He's watching," the man shouts. "A spy, a poisoner." The attention of the tail end of the mob shifts to you. 5 or 6 men break off from the main group. They have that look in their eyes, The predator, look. They are hungry for one more victim. You run. You don't think. You don't plan. You just sprint. You tear down the alley, your boots slipping on the slick stones. You hear heavy footsteps behind you. Get him! Someone screams. You turn a corner, blindly. You are in a narrow passage between two warehouses. Dead end? No, there's a gap in the fence. You squeeze through, tearing your tunic, scraping your skin. You tumble into a courtyard filled with old barrels. You scramble behind them, pressing yourself into the dirt. The men stop at the fence. They can't fit through as easily. They shout curses into the dark. One of them throws a stone. It hits a barrel near your head with a hollow thud. Let him go, one of them grunts. He's probably headed to the river to poison it. The guards will get him. They leave, laughing darkly, returning to the main attraction. You lie there in the dirt, shaking uncontrollably. You realize you have just survived a social encounter that was more dangerous than the buboes. The infection might give you a 50-50 chance, but the mob gives you 0. You check your pockets. You still have your knife. You still have your hardtack, but you have lost something else, your basic belief in the community. You used to think that in a crisis, people pulled together. Now you know that they pull apart, and then they look for someone to burn. You are officially done with people. The isolation of the woods seems like a luxury resort compared to this. You decide that you need to get out of the city. Not just to the edge, but out, completely. You need to find a way over the walls, past the guards, and back into the indifferent embrace of nature. But first, you need to wait for the sun. The night belongs to the monsters, both the microscopic ones and the human ones. You curl up behind the barrels, smelling the faint residue of wine and the stronger scent of fear. You listen to the distant sounds of the city eating itself. You realize that surviving isn't just about keeping your heart beating, it's about keeping your head down. You touch the spot on your chest where you hid the nosegay. You wonder if they were right. Is there poison in the air, or is the poison just inside us? You close your eyes, wishing you were a rat. At least the rats don't pretend to be righteous. They just eat. You wake up behind the barrels, stiff, cold, and coated in a layer of grime that is now a permanent part of your epidermis. The sun is dragging itself over the horizon, casting long, pale shadows across the courtyard. The city is quiet again. The manic energy of the riots has burned out, leaving behind the ash of burnt ledgers and the sour smell of regret. You check your limbs, still attached. You check your armpits, still smooth. You are one day closer to survival. You squeeze back through the gap in the fence and head for the city gates. To your surprise and relief, they are wide open. The guards are gone. Maybe they died, maybe they fled, or maybe they just decided that guarding a city of corpses was a career path with limited growth potential. You walk out, passing under the heavy stone archway. You don't look back at the spires, the smoke, or the memories of the mob. You just look at the road ahead. You are back in the countryside, but it looks different than the deep woods you hid in before. These are the manor lands, the cultivated fields that feed the city. Or at least, they used to. Now they are a landscape of neglect. The wheat is standing tall, golden and heavy, but it is starting to lean. It's overripe. It's rotting on the stalk. The smell is sweet and fermented, like a brewery that exploded. You walk along the muddy track, enjoying the sensation of not being hunted. But you aren't alone for long. Ahead of you, standing by a wooden stile, is a man. He's not a peasant. He's wearing a tunic of dyed wool, blue, a color that costs money, and he has a sword at his belt. He looks frantic. He is pacing back and forth, looking at the empty fields, then at the sky, then at the fields again. He spots you. In the old world, the world of 3 years ago, he would have ignored you, or perhaps demanded you bow. You are a peasant. You are essentially furniture that eats turnips. But today, his eyes light up. He looks at you like you are a long-lost brother carrying a winning lottery ticket. "You there," he calls out. "You have hands." You look at your hands. "Yes," you reply cautiously. "2 of them. I need them," he says, rushing over. He is a steward, the manager of a local lord's estate. The harvest, it's rotting. The tenants, they are all gone, dead or ran off. I have 50 acres of prime wheat and nobody to scythe it. He points to the field. "Get in there. Harvest this section. I'll give you a place to sleep in the barn." You pause. In the past, this wasn't a request. Under the feudal system, you owed labor to the lord. It was the rent you paid for existing. But you look at the steward. He is sweating. He is desperate. You look at the empty road. You look at the rotting wheat. You realize something profound. A basic lesson of economics 101 that hasn't been written yet: supply and demand. The supply of labor, you, has just dropped by 50%. The demand for labor, him, is at an all-time high. "I don't need a barn," you say, leaning casually against the stile. "I have a bush. It's very comfortable." The steward blinks. He's not used to backtalk. I will feed you," he stammers. "Pottage, good pottage." You shake your head. "I'm tired of pottage. I want meat, roast chicken, and ale, the good stuff, and silver." His face turns purple. "You insolent dog! I could have you whipped." "Who?" you ask, looking around the empty field. "Who is going to whip me? You? You look like you have a bad back." This is the moment the world turns upside down. The power dynamic of centuries shatters in a muddy field. He knows it. You know it. He needs you more than you need him. You are no longer a serf. You are a contractor. He sighs, his shoulders slumping. "Fine, 3 pence a day. And lunch. 6 pence, you counter, and I take home a sack of grain." He gasps. 6 pence is a fortune. It's what a master craftsman might earn. But he looks at the sky, threatening rain. If the wheat gets wet, it's ruined. He nods, defeated. 6 pence. Get to work. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The Black Death created the golden age of the laborer. Because there were so few workers left, wages skyrocketed. Peasants who had barely scraped by could suddenly demand high pay. They started eating better, switching from gruel to white bread and meat, and dressing better. It got so bad, for the rich, that in 1351 King Edward III passed the Statute of Laborers, a law that legally forced wages back to pre-plague levels and made it a crime to refuse work. It was essentially a government attempt to ban the laws of economics. Spoiler alert, it failed miserably because people just ignored it. You pick up a scythe lying in the grass. It's heavy, but the rhythm of the work is familiar. Swish, cut, swish, cut. You move through the wheat, but you aren't working with the frantic, terrified speed of a serf afraid of the bailiff. You are working with the steady, leisurely pace of a person earning 6 pence a day. You stop to stretch. You take a nap at noon. You eat the chicken he brings you, tearing into the meat with dirty hands. It tastes like victory. This brings us to a scholarly debate. Did the Black Death end feudalism? The traditional view is yes. The labor shortage gave peasants so much leverage that the old system of serfdom, being tied to the land, just dissolved. However, some modern revisionist historians argue that the system was already cracking before the plague, and the aristocracy actually did a pretty good job of clamping down again in the 15th century. They argue it wasn't a sudden revolution, but a slow, messy transition. But standing in this field, holding a chicken leg and a silver coin, it feels pretty revolutionary to you. As you work, you notice something else. The silence of the countryside isn't total. You hear other workers in distant fields. They are laughing. They are shouting insults at their overseers. There is a strange, giddy atmosphere. It's the feeling of people who have stared death in the face and realized that the old rules don't matter anymore. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. This new wealth led to a leisure preference. Because workers could earn a week's worth of wages in 2 days, many of them just stopped working for the rest of the week. They spent their time in alehouses, playing football, which was violent and often illegal, and gambling. The upper classes were horrified. They called it idleness and vice, but really, it was just the first recorded instance of the 4-day work week. You decide that after this job, you are definitely taking a 3-day weekend. By evening, you have cleared a respectable patch of wheat. The steward returns. He looks pained as he hands you the coins. The silver is cool and heavy in your palm. 6 pence. You could buy a new pair of boots. You could buy a lot of wine. You could buy your way onto a ship. You pocket the money. The steward looks at you expectantly. Tomorrow, he asks. Same price? You look at the horizon. You see the road stretching out. You realize that you can go anywhere. Every town needs workers. Every lord is desperate. You are a mobile economic unit. Maybe, you say, if the ale is better. You walk away, leaving him standing in the stubble. You find a dry spot under a hedgerow to camp for the night. You lay down on your cloak. You are still dirty. You are still in danger of the sickness. But you feel different. You feel valuable. For your entire life, you were told that your station was fixed by God. You were born a peasant. You would die a peasant. And your job was to suffer and serve. But the plague has burned that script. The death of half the world has given the survivors a raise. It's a grim promotion, but you'll take it. You eat a piece of the white bread you demanded from the steward. It's soft, airy, and refined, usually reserved for the nobility. It melts in your mouth. You realize that the world has broken, but in the cracks, something new is growing. You are witnessing the dawn of the middle class, rising from the ashes of the apocalypse. You close your eyes, listening to the crickets. The fear of the mob, the smell of the city, the scratching of the rats. It all feels a little further away tonight. You have silver in your pocket and bread in your belly. You have survived the worst of it. The chaos is settling into a new, weird normal. You drift off to sleep, dreaming not of angels or demons, but of wage negotiations. You dream of asking for 7 pence and maybe a better hat. You wake up. It isn't the startled, heart-pounding awakening of a fugitive, nor the feverish, sweaty waking of the sick. It is a slow, natural rise from consciousness, the kind that only happens when your body finally believes it is safe enough to deep sleep. The sun is already high, warming the rough wool of your cloak. You sit up, brushing dried grass from your hair. You check your armpits, a habit that will probably stay with you until you're 80, and finding them smooth, you take a deep breath. The air has changed. The cloying, sweet smell of the sickness is gone, replaced by the scent of wet earth, vigorous grass, and the faint, salty tang of the distant sea. The world feels scrubbed clean. It's quiet. Not the terrified silence of the lockdown, but a vast, empty silence. The kind of silence that happens when the volume of humanity has been turned down by half. You stand up and walk to the top of the ridge to survey the landscape. Below you, the valley stretches out like a green quilt. But the quilt has holes in it. You see the village you passed yesterday, the one with the desperate steward. It looks small, vulnerable. You see the stone manor house of the Lord on the hill. It used to look like a fortress of unassailable power, a symbol of the hierarchy that kept you in the mud. Now, it just looks like a pile of rocks that nobody is around to fix. You are witnessing the physical manifestation of a demographic collapse. This is the morning after the apocalypse. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The Black Death killed between 30% and 50% of Europe's population in just a few years. In some regions, like parts of Italy and France, it was closer to 60%. It was a reset button on the human species. Entire family lines, guilds, and village communities were extinguished. The crowded world of the early 14th century, where land was scarce and labor was cheap, has been inverted overnight. You start walking down the other side of the ridge. You pass a cluster of cottages that looks abandoned. You step closer. The roofs have caved in. Nettles and brambles are growing over the doorsteps. This is a lost village. In England alone, there are over 3,000 of these deserted medieval villages, DMVs, that were simply wiped off the map or abandoned because there weren't enough people left to live in them. Nature is reclaiming the real estate. You see a deer grazing in what used to be a blacksmith's garden. It looks at you, unbothered. The animals are emboldened. The forests are expanding, creeping back into the fields that your ancestors spent centuries clearing. It's an ecological rebound. The pressure on the land has lifted. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit regarding the environment. Because so many people died, millions of acres of farmland returned to forest. This massive reforestation actually sucked enough carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to cause a measurable drop in global temperatures. Some scientists argue that the Black Death contributed to the Little Ice Age that chilled Europe in the following centuries. You are looking at trees that are literally cooling the planet because there are no peasants left to chop them down for firewood. You reach a stream and kneel to drink. The water is clear. You wash the grime of the city from your face. You look at your reflection. You look older than your years. You have the 1,000-yard stare of a combat veteran, but you also look rich. Well, medieval rich. You have a silver coin in your pocket. You have a pair of boots you scavenged. You have a full belly. You realize that the fear is fading, replaced by a strange, hollow sense of possibility. The rigid social structure, the feudal system, has cracked. It hasn't vanished entirely. The lords will try to glue it back together with laws and taxes for another century or so, but the spell is broken. You know now that the Lord bleeds just like you. You know that the priest can't stop the rain. You know that your labor is worth silver. Historians still argue about the psychological shift that happened here. Did the Black Death make people more religious, driving them into a frenzy of piety to appease an angry God? Or did it make them more secular, more focused on the here and now, because they realized life is short and brutal? This is the birth of the carpe diem attitude. You look at the sun and think, I might as well enjoy this, because the rats could come back next Tuesday. You continue walking until you reach a crossroads. In the old days, You wouldn't have had a choice. You would have turned back toward the manor, toward your serfdom. But today, you stand there, looking at the four paths. One goes to the coast, one goes to the city, maybe not there, one goes to the mountains. You realize you are a masterless man. It's a dangerous title, but a thrilling one. You can go anywhere. You can demand wages. You can learn a trade. The shortage of skilled craftsmen means that if you can hold a hammer, you can probably become a carpenter's apprentice tomorrow. The guilds are so desperate, they are breaking their own rules to let new blood in. You verify your pocket again. The silver groat is warm against your hip. It's a seed. You could buy a plot of land. Land is dirt cheap now. You could buy a loom. You could buy a ticket on a ship to somewhere the plague hasn't touched. Good luck finding it, but the hope is nice. You look at the horizon. The sky is a brilliant, indifferent blue. The birds are singing their hearts out, oblivious to the tragedy that just occurred. The world is still turning. The wheat is still growing. The only difference is that there is more of it for you. You take a step forward, not toward the manor, toward the coast. You've never seen the ocean. You heard the fish are good there. And who is going to stop you? The sheriff is dead. The bailiff is dead. The king is hiding in his country house. You are the survivor. You are the 1%. Well, the 50% who made it. You carry the trauma of the pits, the smell of the vinegar, and the sound of the bells in your memory. But you also carry the future. You are the ancestor of the Renaissance. You are the resilient genetic code that will rebuild the world. You adjust your pack. It's lighter now that the hardtack is gone. You feel a breeze on your face. It feels clean. You start to whistle. It's a cheerful, defiant little tune. You walk down the road, your boots crunching on the gravel, walking away from the history books and into your own life. The Black Death is over. The long convalescence of humanity has begun. And you're going to be just fine. You have 6 pence, a sharp knife, and a very strong immune system, and that is where we leave you. Walking down a sunlit road, leaving the shadows of the 14th century behind. The heavy wooden doors of the city have closed, locking the history away in the past where it belongs. The frantic ringing of the bells has faded into a gentle, rhythmic silence. The smell of smoke and vinegar has drifted away on the wind, replaced by the cool, fresh air of your own room. You can stop running now. You can stop checking for danger. The journey is done. You have survived the history, just as you survive every long day in your own life. Feel the weight of your body sinking into your mattress, just as the tension sank away from the traveler on that road. Your legs are heavy, relaxed, and still. Your hands are uncurled, resting softly. There are no rats here, no fleets of ships on the horizon. Just the soft hum of the night, the steady rise and fall of your chest, and the comfort of knowing that you are safe, warm, and exactly where you need to be. Let the story drift away like mist in the morning sun. Let the dates and the facts dissolve into a soft, gray haze. You are drifting now, floating on the quiet river of sleep. The current is slow and gentle, carrying you away from the noise, away from the worry, down into the deep, dark, restorative waters of rest. Close your eyes, deeply. The world will still be there when you wake up, but for now, it is time to let go.